At my graduation ceremony, while everyone applauded and my mother pressed a tissue to the corner of her eye, I quietly completed the transfer of my entire $5 million inheritance from my grandfather into a trust registered solely under my name. My father sat smiling in the third row. My brother was already staring at his phone, most likely messaging someone about money he had convinced himself I owed him. I confirmed the final signature beneath my graduation gown with one thumb, then lifted my head as though nothing had happened at all. The following morning, they arrived at my apartment carrying champagne property listings and a carefully assembled vision for my life. But the cruelest part was never what they asked for. It was the reason behind it. Before I go any further, please tap like and leave a comment telling me where you are watching from. Let me know if you have ever had people in your family treat your future like it was theirs to decide, because hearing your stories might remind me that I'm not going through this alone. People always assume my family had wealth because we had mastered the appearance of it. My mother, Celeste, could take a supermarket cake and display it on the right glass stand, and suddenly it looked like something from a private patisserie. My father, Martin, owned 3 Navy suits, each tailored just precisely enough to make strangers assume he was doing considerably better than he actually was. And my brother Connor had this peculiar talent for entering any room with the confidence of someone who had already crossed his first million, even though most of his business conversations ended with someone else covering the bill. From the outside, we were a picture of Polish. The Thanksgiving table was dressed by noon, the Christmas stockings matched perfectly, and the family photographs showed everyone leaning into each other warmly, even when no kind word had been spoken all morning. But inside that house, love arrived with quiet conditions attached. If my parents spent money on something, they filed it away in memory. If Connor stumbled, the family reframed it as a learning experience. If I accomplished something, it was quietly repackaged as proof that the family had invested wisely in me, even when they had contributed nothing. My grandfather Arthur was the only person in my life who never once made me feel like I owed him anything in return for his love. He lived in Evanston in an old house that always carried the scent of cedar, fresh coffee, and the peppermint candies he kept in a blue dish beside the front door. He had built his financial advisory practice from a single rented office and a folding chair. But he never spoke about money as though it were sacred. He described it more like a fence. A fence does not mean you resent your neighbors, he told me once while we sat together at his kitchen table sorting through old receipts. It simply means you understand where your yard ends. I was 23 when he called me over on a rainy Thursday evening. The windows in his study had gone foggy at the edges. A baseball game played softly on the radio. 2 mugs of tea sat on the table, but his had gone cold. "Evelyn," he said, "I need you to listen without trying to make me feel better." That was how he told me he was ill. No dramatic pauses, no trembling hands, just one sentence, plain and heavy, placed between us like a stone. I remember keeping my eyes on the steam curling from my cup, because looking at his face felt like something I could not survive in that moment. Then he said something even harder to absorb. He told me he was leaving his personal estate to me. I was certain I had misheard him. He raised one hand before I could speak. "Not because you are my favorite," he said, "but because you are the only one who will not confuse helping someone with rescuing them." Over the following year, he and his attorney, Miriam, constructed the trust in silence, approximately $5 million in my name, protected by terms strict enough that even I could not tap it carelessly for family requests without triggering serious financial penalties. Before he died, he handed me a sealed envelope. "Open it only when the trust is funded." He said it calmly, and I did not understand then that the letter inside would describe the very next morning with almost unsettling accuracy. My grandfather passed away the following spring on a night so still I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from outside his room. At the memorial, my father worked the room like a man hosting a business luncheon, shaking every hand within reach. My mother kept touching the pearl necklace at her throat. Connor stood toward the back, scrolling through his phone, waiting for the part that everyone pretends not to be thinking about. The reading of the will took place in a downtown law office with gray carpet and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since morning. Miriam read at a careful pace. Arthur had arranged a separate share of the family business for my father. He had left my mother several heirlooms. Connor received an old watch and a car my grandfather had cherished. Then Miriam looked directly at me. "The remaining personal estate," she read, "will be held in the Evelyn Hart Trust." My mother's expression shifted first. Not to anger, not yet. Something sharper than that. A look that said I had taken a seat at a table she had always believed was hers by right. Connor leaned forward. "How much?" Miriam did not flinch. "Approximately $5 million. The room went completely quiet except for the clicking of the air vent overhead. My father turned toward me. "You knew." I gave one small nod. Connor let out a laugh that held no warmth at all. "So that is what all those quiet little visits were about." "I did not manipulate him," I said. My mother pressed her hands together until the knuckles paled. "Sweetheart, nobody said that." But her eyes communicated it every day for the next year. They rarely came to me with direct requests. That would have required too much honesty. My mother forwarded articles about daughters who honored their parents. My father sent emails with investment frameworks attached, subject lines reading things like family strategy and long-term growth planning. Connor texted screenshots of app concepts, always wrapped in the language of opportunity rather than need. Each time I gave the same answer. The trust has limitations. And each time, what they heard was something else entirely. Evelyn has the money and is choosing not to share it. By graduation week, the pressure had turned polished again, which frightened me more than open anger ever could. My mother wanted photographs taken. My father wanted a dinner reservation. Connor mentioned he would love to catch up sometime soon. During the ceremony itself, Miriam's secure message came through on my phone. "Funding complete. Final confirmation required." I signed beneath my gown while the crowd around me cheered for someone else's name. For one clean, quiet second, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Safety. Then the next morning arrived and my doorbell rang before my coffee had finished cooling. Through the peephole, I could see my parents, my brother, a realtor, a woman with a leather case, champagne, and a folder thick enough to contain an entire redesigned life. And I understood immediately that this was not a misunderstanding. It was a coordinated plan. I did not open the door right away. I stood there barefoot on the cold kitchen tile, one hand wrapped around my coffee mug, watching their shapes blur through the glass. My mother adjusted her hair. My father checked his watch. Connor shifted from one foot to the other with the quiet restlessness of someone already irritated by how long it was taking to receive something. That was when I remembered the letter. It was still in my desk drawer, sealed shut in my grandfather's careful handwriting, my name on the front and nothing else. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. "Dear Evelyn, if you are reading this, the trust is funded and they have probably already started." I stopped breathing entirely. He had written that my parents would arrive with plans before they ever arrived with questions. My father would frame it as strategy. My mother would call it guidance. Connor would call it an opportunity. All three of them would call it family. Then came the line that cracked something open inside me. Guilt will be their softest voice and their sharpest weapon. I sat down on the edge of my chair. For a moment, I was not a financial professional with a protected trust under my name. I was a small girl again, trying to earn warmth at a dinner table where praise always found Connor first. I remembered my mother smoothing his hair before school photographs and telling me to move in closer to the frame. I remembered my father clapping Connor on the back for making another attempt, while my straight A results earned nothing more than a distracted smile. The doorbell rang again, held down this time, longer and more deliberate. My grandfather's letter closed with a single truth. "You are allowed to protect what I trusted you to carry." I folded the pages slowly. My tears had already dried before they reached my chin. Then I pulled up the trust guidelines on my phone, read through them once more, and walked to the door. When I opened it, my mother smiled the way people smile when they have rehearsed it in an elevator mirror. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, lifting the champagne just enough to make sure I saw the gold foil. "We wanted to celebrate you properly." It was not yet 9 in the morning. My father stepped inside before I extended any invitation. That was the first thing I registered. Not the realtor standing behind him, not the woman with the leather case, not Connor's impatient expression. My father simply crossed my threshold as though he had signed the lease himself. My mother followed, trailing expensive perfume and cold morning air. Connor came in last, grazing my shoulder with a muttered "finally" as he passed. I stayed beside the open door. The two strangers hesitated in the hallway until my mother gestured them in as though my apartment had already been converted into a showroom. "This is Daniel," she announced. "He specializes in beautiful properties in the suburbs. And this is Vivian. She has wonderful taste. Very clean, very timeless." Vivian offered me an uneasy smile. Daniel pressed a thick folder against his chest and waited. I looked past them toward my father. What exactly is this? He placed his own folder directly on my kitchen counter, next to my half-finished coffee. A conversation we should have had months ago. Connor dropped onto my sofa without asking, spreading his jacket across the armrest like he owned the cushions. "A good conversation," he said. For once. My apartment was not large. A compact kitchen, a narrow living area, 2 windows facing the building across the street, a stack of books beside the couch, an unfolded basket of laundry in the corner. It was mine, and it suddenly felt occupied by something it had never agreed to hold. My mother began opening cabinet doors the way someone does when they are inspecting a rental property before deciding whether to take it. "Evelyn, honey," she said, "this place was perfectly fine when you were a student. But now, with your career and your resources, you deserve a real home." Daniel accepted that as his opening. He spread glossy printed pages across my counter. "There is a property I think you are going to love," he said. "Classic architecture, generous square footage, close enough to the city, strong long-term value. Just under $2 million. I stared at the image of a white house with black shutters and a lawn so immaculate it looked rendered. "I am not purchasing a house." My mother laughed softly, the particular laugh she reserved for making my words sound like something a child had said. "You have not even seen it in person. I do not need to." My father leaned into the counter edge. "Evelyn, real estate is one of the soundest decisions you can make right now. Your grandfather would have wanted you to build real stability. And there it was. His name deployed like a key they believed would open every lock inside me. My grandfather already built stability," I said. "It is called the trust." Connor sat forward and reached for his phone the way some people reach for a lifeline. His entire life could be reduced to a screen full of ideas that no one had ever chosen to fund. "I have been developing something real this time," he said. "Not like before. I have a developer ready, early projections, a marketing structure. I only need around $250,000 to get it moving." The word only landed in the room and just sat there. I looked at him. "Only." He frowned. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Act as though I am begging." My mother pivoted from the cabinets. "He is not begging. He's inviting you to be part of something with your brother." I could hear the heating system kicking on through the wall, a low, steady hum, the most normal sound in the room. My father opened his own folder now. Charts, printed pages, notes organized under tidy category headings, debt restructuring, family investments, projected returns. "I also put together a broader picture," he said. "Nothing extreme. Some shared investments, some consolidation, a framework that ensures this money supports more than a single person." I almost smiled, not from amusement but from recognition. My grandfather had anticipated the precise shape of all of it. My father with charts, my mother with a house, Connor with a dream. I walked to the counter and placed my hand flat on top of his folder. "Who gave you permission to build a plan around my money?" The atmosphere in the room shifted. Daniel examined his shoes. Vivian quietly closed her sample case halfway. My father's jaw tightened. "We are your family." That was not what I asked. My mother's eyes narrowed. Do not speak to your father that way. I turned to face her. Then explain to me who gave you permission to bring strangers into my apartment to pressure me into purchasing a house I never once mentioned wanting. Her mouth opened, then closed without producing anything. Connor stood. This is completely unreasonable. You are acting as though we forced our way in here. You arrived with a realtor, an interior designer, unopened champagne and spending proposals the morning after my trust was funded. My mother went very still. My father's eyes moved toward her quickly and then away again, guilty and telling. So they had known. Perhaps not every clause, not every rule, but enough to know exactly when to show up. Something inside me hardened into place and stayed there. You were waiting, I said. Nobody spoke. Connor threw both hands up. Of course we were waiting. Grandpa left you $5 million. $5 million, Evelyn. And we are supposed to behave as though that has no impact on the rest of this family? It has an impact on me. It should affect all of us. No, I said. That is the exact misunderstanding you keep returning to. My father pushed off the counter. You are young and you are emotional and you have never managed responsibility at this scale. I manage financial risk professionally, I said, for paying clients. He cut in. This is family, and that is precisely why the guidelines are stricter. I pulled the printed trust summary from my desk drawer and set it between us on the counter. The trust permits distributions under specific conditions, education, documented health needs, approved investments, verified assets. It does not permit casual family transfers, business rescues, personal debt relief, or lifestyle funding. If I violate those terms, I trigger penalties against my own access that can last for years. Arthur did not simply leave me money. He left me a locked door and the only key to keep it locked. Connor scoffed. How convenient. Yes, I said. It is. Grandpa made certain of that. My mother's voice went soft then, which was more destabilizing than anything else she could have done. Evelyn, baby, we raised you. We went without things so that you could have more. I looked at her hands wrapped around the champagne bottle, nails perfectly done. No, Mom. Grandpa covered most of my education. I worked for the rest. I saved. And every time Connor failed, you told him it showed courage. Every time I succeeded, you told me it was simply what was expected. Her face colored. That is a cruel thing to say. What is cruel, I replied, is arriving here with a house already selected before asking me whether I wanted one. Connor pointed across the room at me. You have always done this. You act as though you are better than everyone because you got good grades and Grandpa preferred your company. Grandpa trusted me. He cut the rest of us out. Keep his name out of your mouth in my home, I said quietly. He laughed, but fear lived underneath it now. Your home? This little box? Yes, I said, mine, which is exactly why all of you are leaving it. My father stepped between us, attempting to recapture control of the room. Enough. We are not going anywhere until this is resolved like adults. Then let us resolve it. I picked Connor's phone off the sofa where he had tossed it beside his printed proposal and handed it back to him. You have borrowed close to $100,000 from this family across multiple failed ventures and repaid none of it. Not the food delivery concept, not the trading platform, not the rental service. Each time you described it as temporary. Each time Mom and Dad absorbed what remained. Connor's face went dark red. You know nothing about building something. I know the difference between investing in something and rescuing someone from themselves. I turned to my father. You have spent years advising other people to reduce their debt, diversify, and live within what they actually earn. But inside this family, you built a life entirely around appearances. A house with payments that stretch you every month. Vacations purchased on credit. A quiet belief that Arthur's money would eventually straighten all of it out. The color left his face before the hardness returned to it. My mother whispered something sharp under her breath. And you? I said, turning to face her. You did not come here today to help me find a home. You came to choose a backdrop. A dining room large enough for Thanksgiving photographs. A kitchen you could approve. A life you could describe to other people and allow them to believe you had helped build it. The champagne bottle shifted in her grip. She steadied it before it could fall. Vivian looked like she was calculating the distance to the nearest exit. I turned toward her and Daniel. I am sorry you were brought into this situation. This meeting was arranged entirely without my knowledge or agreement. You are free to leave. Daniel closed his folder immediately. Of course. Vivian nodded. I am so sorry. My mother's voice cracked hard. They are not leaving. Yes, I said, they are. And perhaps it was something in my voice. Or the way I stood there barefoot in my own kitchen, completely still, no longer shaking. But they left. The door clicked shut behind them. Now it was only blood in the room. My father studied me as though he were looking at someone he had never encountered before. You have turned cold, he said. No, I told him. I have become unavailable. Connor grabbed his jacket from the sofa. Enjoy being wealthy and alone. I let the sentence reach me. I felt exactly where he had aimed it. Then I watched it fall to the floor. I would rather be alone, I said, than bought. My mother's eyes went bright, but the tears did not reach me the way they once had. One day you will need us, she said. Maybe, I replied. And when that day comes, I hope you arrive. With love. Not with folders. My father picked up his plan from the counter. His hands were not steady. This conversation is not finished. I walked to the door and held it open. It is finished for the money. No one moved. So I said it plainly and slowly, with enough space between each word that there could be no selective hearing later. No loans, no investments, no bailouts, no exceptions. The trust is not a shared family account, and I am not a safety net for decisions I had no part in making. Connor left first, his shoulder catching the door frame on the way out. My mother followed behind him, still holding the unopened champagne. My father paused at the threshold, and I thought for a single moment that he might say something that came from a place without agenda. Instead, he said, "Your grandfather made a mistake." I held his gaze without blinking. "No," I said. "He made a plan." Then I closed the door. A minute later, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "You made your choice." I read it twice and waited for the familiar wave of guilt to rise inside my chest. It did not come. For the first time in my life, the quiet that followed my family's exit did not feel like a punishment I had earned. It felt like something I had chosen. But they did not stop after that morning. They simply changed their approach. My mother began forwarding articles about forgiveness, about gratitude, about daughters who remembered where they came from. She rarely added more than a sentence. Thought this might resonate. This made me think of you. I deleted most of them before the preview finished loading. Connor started with smaller amounts. $10 here, $40 there. Payment requests sent with jokes attached, as though he were testing a locked door with the tip of one finger. Coffee money, don't be ridiculous, you can spare it. I ignored all of it. My father stayed quiet the longest, which unsettled me more than anything. Then the emails began arriving again, calm and precise, no emotion in them at all. Professional-looking documents about investment structures, debt simplification, family financial planning. He still believed that if he made control sound like responsibility, I might eventually hand it over. I did not. I went to work. I built financial models. I sat through long meetings under fluorescent office light with coffee going cold beside my keyboard. Through the trust, following every documented procedure Arthur had designed, I purchased a small condo in Chicago. I paid fair rent back into the trust because that was exactly how he had structured it. The condo had morning light across plain white walls and windows that looked out over the city rather than someone else's expectations. For the first time in my adult life, I chose my own furniture without hearing my mother's voice running commentary in the back of my mind. Then Connor got engaged. He called after more than 6 months of complete silence and talked for 4 minutes before eventually arriving at the number, around $75,000 for the wedding. As my sister, he said, I thought you would want to help with this. I do want to help you, I told him. Have a wedding that matches what you can actually afford. He ended the call without another word. Months after that, my mother called. Their house had become too expensive to maintain. They needed around $100,000 to relieve the pressure. I told her to consider downsizing. She told me I was a terrible daughter. This time, I did not cry once after we hung up. Then, after months of silence from him specifically, a letter arrived from my father. Handwritten, uneven lines on the page, no charts or printed spreadsheets attached. He said he was sorry for bringing strangers into my home without my consent, sorry for treating my inheritance as though it belonged to the whole family, sorry for reading my boundary as an act of betrayal against them. He did not ask for anything financial. He asked for coffee. We met the following Saturday at a small coffee shop in Evanston. My father looked older without a folder in his hands, in the best way that phrase can mean. We talked about work first, then about the weather outside, then about a book Arthur had always kept on the corner of his desk. It was uncomfortable and unsteady, and it was the most real conversation we had managed in years. Before we left, I gave him the only rule that mattered. If we are going to rebuild something here, Dad, the trust stays entirely outside of it. He nodded slowly. I understand. Perhaps he did. Perhaps he was genuinely beginning to learn. My mother and Connor have not reached out since. I do not know whether they ever will, but I no longer interpret their silence as confirmation that I did something wrong. Family does not mean surrender. Love does not mean becoming someone's financial solution, and holding a boundary does not make you a cruel person. It makes you a whole one. If you have ever had to protect your own future from the people who claim to love you most, I want to hear your story in the comments, and hit subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.